Uh, Welcome back to those of you who have been joining us in our Thread of the Month webinar series, and welcome to any newcomers who have been joining us. And we've kicked this off in the beginning of 2023. I believe this is our fourth in a series of 45-minute, 1-hour webinars discussing the Thread of the Month. My name is Nick Del Rey. I am the Director of Training at Noble, formerly Federal Resources. So I'm not sure if you've logged on to a Federal Resources or Noble, but here we are, the new Noble, getting things done, supporting our responders, first responders, firefighters, law enforcement officers, and war fighters. And this afternoon or this morning, wherever you happen to be joining us, we're fortunate to have our guest presenter, firefighter Brett Bigger, who I like to refer to as Chief Officer Brett Bigger, because he carries himself with such authority and executive presence. But Brett is kind enough and has developed this lithium-ion battery response program, which we are partnering with Brett. And Brett will be featuring it June 7th at the June 8th, maybe, at the International Association of Fire Chiefs Conference in Baltimore. And thank you, Brett, for joining us and developing this program. If you're not aware, lithium-ion battery fires, emergencies have become a big, big problem nationwide, I would imagine worldwide. My former background was from New York City Fire Department, and like the far majority of fires in New York City these days are being started by lithium-ion batteries. So it's a really, excuse the pun, hot topic to discuss. And we're lucky to have Brett with us today to help share what he has learned. He's a firefighter out of Renton, Washington, and with a number of years on the job. After 20, I stopped counting because then you sound like you're old. But Brett, thank you very much for developing this for us and sharing with us this afternoon. And with that, I will hand it off to Brett Bigger. All yours, Brett.
Thank you, Chief. Thanks for the kind words. And welcome everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. The program we're going to talk about, like the Chief mentioned, is a kind of a snapshot of a little bit longer program that I put together, and we put it together here in Renton, kind of modeling as we developed our battery response program. And like everybody that's on today, I'm sure knows, this is a problem. I guess we can call it an emerging problem, but it's certainly going to keep growing as we see more and more of these lithium batteries, more EVs, and as they age, which is, we'll talk about why, as they get older, as they get more abused, that's going to create more problems for us. And there's so many of them out there that it's not going anywhere anytime soon. If they quit making lithium-ion batteries today, the newest person on your department will retire going on lithium-ion battery runs in 30 years, because that's just how it's going to be. They're so prevalent out in our community. The Chief talked about a little bit about me, 25 years in Renton. I've been our hazmat team leader for a chunk of those. I'm on our FEMA team. None of that stuff really matters for today. But let's talk about why a response plan to lithium-ion batteries. And again, if you read the paper, if you watch the news, it's a huge problem. Some communities, New York City, is seeing a much greater impact just by the nature of so many e-bikes and the conditions those e-bikes work in, the abuse they take, leading to failures, leading to fires, leading to more problems. But we're all seeing it. We're certainly seeing it in our community, and I'm willing to bet all of you are as well. The battery production, from this point forward, they expect it to increase fivefold by 2030. And we can measure the output in, watt hours or gigawatt hours, and that increase, would power 4,500 of Marty McFly's DeLoreans, which I feel like is a good measure of threat in the world. Projected it'll be 26.4 million electric vehicles on the road by 2030, 10% of the light duty vehicle fleet out there. The state, I'm in Washington State, our governor set a goal that there will be no more pure internal combustion engines. They have to be electric or hybrid electric by 2035. So, we know there's just going to be more and more of these things on the road. That increases our likelihood of seeing problems with them. Big fleets, rental car fleets, you can see all the ads that Hertz has now for their electric vehicles. Lots of Amazon out here, like everywhere. A lot of the Amazon delivery vans are going to electric. PACCAR, which is based in Renton, Washington, is building all electric semi trucks. So we're going to see more of that on the road. The current administration put funding in for a bunch of electric buses, school buses, to try to electrify those. And now we've got electric vehicles carrying lots of children, lots of passengers. So the impacts are going to be huge moving forward. And everybody knows that. And the question, I think, is, so what? How do we respond? How do we do our job? How can we be effective with this new situation? And that's what we want to talk about today. And that really was the goal of putting this program together is, tons of people talking about EVs and showing you the insides of batteries and we can hold batteries and play with batteries. That's awesome, but it doesn't necessarily help me respond at 2 a.m. What changes in our tactics to be effective at these calls? How do we do it well? So we've got to think about it. And just another example of the magnitude. This is just the Tesla Model 3 and Model Y. And we'll take a look at the battery packs on electric vehicles. They're not, like most of they're not one big battery. They're made up of a bunch of small batteries. And in fact, a Tesla Model 3 or Model Y has up to 4,600 of the 18,650 batteries in a module. In the total vehicle, we have more than that. And then just on the road with the Teslas, there's 14,273,000 plus individual cells in those vehicles. That's just those two models of Tesla, when I made that statistic. So there are lots of batteries out there, and we need to figure out how to manage them. I grabbed a couple of news clippings. There are thousands out there, just do a search for it. But I thought these were kind of interesting when we talk about that idea of how do we have to modify our tactics to be effective at fighting these fires. And Tesla tells us that, in their guidance, that it could take up to 3,000 gallons of water to extinguish a Tesla with a battery pack fire. And there's in the upper right there, down in California, they use over 4,500 gallons of water, 4 hours to try to put out a Tesla burning on the side of the road. And at the end of the day, that Tesla was, it was garbage. Nothing was saved in it. But that's a lot of water. That's a lot of runoff. So clearly our tactics aren't effective. What we used in the past doesn't work. The one on the left is up here where I am. And, fire department responds out to a structure fire. That fire was caused by the failure of a lithium-ion battery. The crews go in, they fight the fire, they do a good job, they recognize it, they pull the batteries out of the house, but there's no plan. They don't have a system to get rid of the batteries. The homeowner doesn't know what to do. So they're laying in the middle of the driveway. The homeowner says, well, I can't have that. So he pushes them over by the side of the house. And then a couple of days later, they fail again, start a fire. And now that fire's in a house with, non-intact fire barriers because the walls are opened up to check for extension from the original fire. So we need to have a plan. What are we doing when we go to these houses that have battery involved fires? Are we making sure they're all out of the structure? But then are we leaving it to the homeowner to decide what to do? Or do we have a plan? Are we as a fire department going to take those and ship them off, or work with the solid waste folks in our county, work with environmental people in the state to be able to get them out of there? And that's really what we looked at when we built our program, which in the class, the 4-hour class, we'll talk about that flow chart of how do you build a program? What do you need to think about? And it's easy to say, pull all those batteries out as soon as we find them. But if they, in this case, were the cause of the fire investigators want to see them, and they don't like having all of the evidence piled up in the middle of the driveway when they get there to do their investigation. So we've got to work with them. But if we want to get them out, we got to get them out before we do a ton of overhaul, or they get buried under sheetrock and insulation and lath and plaster and all that other stuff. So there are some things to think about in building a program, and that's one of the things in the class that we'll talk about. How do you build your program? What are the questions you need to answer? And the first one is, are we going to do something with lithium-ion batteries? Yes or no? And the answer, I think, for every fire department has to be yes. What we do and how we do it are the things that change. And we talked about the tactics, and one of the things that we put together for the class, like a lot of the hazmat IQ classes, above the line, below the line, propane IQ, the bio IQ that Chris Aguirre put together a year ago, you leave with a book of tactics, something that's going to help you make decisions on what to do. And there's sort of our, the table of contents of our battery response guide. And I broke things down into a couple of categories, and we could certainly say, like, yeah, you don't have to break it down that much. You just I had to make a decision. So we look at small battery packs. That's things like iPads and cell phones, mobility devices. Those are things like e-bikes or Segways, hoverboards, any of that sort of thing. Electric vehicles from the Chevy Volt to a Tesla to a Rivian to the Kenworth all electric semi that's coming. In the guidebook and in the class, we'll talk about energy storage facilities. Those are becoming much more common. We've had some incidents in the fire service that have been very catastrophic. I think we've been lucky, and we'll talk about what we need to think about when responding to those facilities. We'll talk a little bit about photovoltaics, which are becoming more common even out here in Washington without any sun. We're seeing much more solar panels popping up on residential, commercial. The economy of it is just becoming such that it's worthwhile. So we'll see more of that, and they pose some unique hazards. There are things about the photovoltaics that we need to take into account to operate safely. And again, it's got to change our tactics if we want to be effective. And then unknown, right? So going into structure fires, commercial fires, we may have to change our tactics if we're going into a bike shop with hundreds of e-bikes that may have been damaged by the heat. Now those are all potential failures. They may fail immediately. They may fail in 5 minutes, an hour. They may fail in a week. Once they're damaged, we don't know when they're going to fail, and they're not safe until they're completely discharged, which is hard to tell in the field often. So we need to be careful. And changes to tactics in firefighting are going to be things like recognizing that there are lots of batteries present by looking for chargers, looking for e-bike scooters, that sort of thing. And then making sure they're not between us and our way out. And if they are, making sure maybe we pull more hand lines, that we have backup lines in the structure to protect those exits until we can get those devices out, out of the structure, out in the street, out in the yard, where they're not posing a hazard to us anymore. So that's sort of the table of contents. That's what that field guide, that tactic guide gives us. And again, we thought it was very important that people walk away with something that a month later at 2 a.m, they have the tactics. And I'll tell you, for the most part, they're simple, but it's new. We're changing. So we need a playbook. We need a guidebook that helps us make the right decision and reminds us of what we need to look for if we haven't done it. It's that checklist that helps us in a Mayday when we're flying a plane. It's a difference between crashing it and landing it in the Hudson with nobody hurt. That's what that checklist gets us. So I think it's an important part of what we've built with this program, and I think it matters a lot. Again, we broke down that category. We said, there it is, right? The battery packs, mobility devices, vehicles, energy storage systems, and we'll look at photovoltaics at the end. But I wanted to show you, we talked about the fact that these vehicle battery packs aren't single batteries. They're modules made up of a bunch of individual batteries all connected. And in that bottom picture, we can see a damaged battery pack, and we can see those individual 18650 batteries or 2170s or whatever they may be. And Tesla is moving to an even larger battery in their battery packs. And it's all about energy density. The more we can fit into them, which is really what makes these batteries so dangerous when they fail, is because there's so much energy. That energy is heat. In a failure, that heat then causes additional batteries to fail, that cascading failure. That's why it's a big deal. And the industry is moving towards higher energy densities because that's what we want. We want smaller batteries that last longer. So we're our own worst enemy because that's what we're demanding, and they're able to provide it. Different battery styles. Again, the ones on that Tesla, were a cylindrical battery. We can also see pouch batteries. Those are often in cell phones, are pretty common. Prismatic, which are more rectangular. They're just the same chemistry, same technology. They're just set up to better work in a device. And that could be something like a laptop battery. And it doesn't really matter the style of battery, though it can change a little bit the failure modes. But again, if we have a battery that begins to fail, and they fail for a number of reasons. They fail because they've been damaged physically, mechanically. We put a nail through it. I crushed my cell phone in the seat on an airplane. That mechanical damage causes a short, causes all of that energy stored in the battery to then short, create heat. That heat then causes the electrolyte and the battery casing, in some cases, to decompose, to give off gases that are toxic and gases that are flammable. And that's why we see the fires. There's enough heat in that failure for them to fire. Other things that cause damage can be age. Just charging batteries over time degrades the interior, causes the lithium in the batteries to form crystals. They call them dendrites. Eventually, those can span across an electrolyte gap and short the battery. Heat damages them. Corrosion. So we're seeing lots of issues with the cars that were submerged in Florida last year during the hurricanes. That water, even though those battery packs are sealed, the salt water gets in there, it does damage, and eventually those fail. So we're seeing those cars that were recovered and being sold other places or being salvaged, that those batteries are failing unpredictably because they were damaged by that salt water intrusion. When the batteries start to fail, like we said, they generate a lot of heat. They also generate those toxic and flammable gases. The heat in one cell can fail the cell next to it, and the one next to it, and that's called a cascading failure. And that's why we see these battery fires go for such a long duration. Until we get the heat out of there, we can't stop it, right? As long as you're energized, it's going to happen. And like we say, it's not done until they're completely discharged. And that could be days to weeks to hours. That's why we see batteries fail weeks later after being involved in a fire, after being involved in a motor vehicle collision. So we've got to get in there and intervene to do it. So it argues to being somewhat aggressive, not risky, but when we show up on these car fires early, that we've got to pull a line and we've got to get water on the batteries, on the fire, not on the trunk, not in the passenger compartment. It's typically under the vehicle. That's how we get water to try to absorb that heat and stop that cascading failure. So again, we're talking about changing tactics, right? It's not a fire of the contents, it's the battery pack under the vehicle that we've got to address. If we show up to a damaged vehicle, we need to be looking in an accident. We need to be looking for signs of potential failure. Thermal imagers are great. Temp guns work to see, is that battery pack getting hot? Are we hearing any hissing sounds? Do we see gases coming off? One of the weird things in the failure of these lithium-ion batteries, the electrolyte often smells sweet. It almost smells like, I think, strawberries. So if you kind of smell a weird, sickly, sweet smell, that could be an indication of battery failure because of the off-gassing of the electrolyte. So again, we shouldn't be out there smelling for it, but if you notice that, that should be an alarm sign now that something could be going on. Full PPE, getting into PPE if we're not in it, and then getting thermal imagers to figure out where it's hot, and then getting ready to put water on it, or if it's a small device like a cell phone, being able to put it in water, in a sink, in a bathtub, in a bucket, something so we can start to pull that heat out and stop that cascading failure early. And there's a picture of a Tesla, and that's very typical early, the picture on the left. And notice that the smoke is low, and it's low because that's where the battery packs are. And again, that's a Tesla parked, right? It's not in an accident, anything like that. So the damage could have happened earlier, or it could have been related to charging, which is one of the things that can lead to failure in these batteries, is the rate we charge them, how often we charge them. But that's a very typical example of that off-gassing. Those are toxic gases, hydrogen, carbon monoxide. A lot of them are fluorine containing. And we know from just chemistry, from Hazmat IQ, that things with fluorine in them are bad. We don't want to be breathing that. And then because there's enough heat and those gases are flammable, we've got an ignition. And the problem oftentimes when these things happen in parking lots is that they're very close to another electric car, especially when they're on car chargers. And we see in the airport, in the hospital, in the apartment buildings, 5, 10, 15 electric vehicle chargers side by side. So when one fails, it exposes the one next to it, which will then heat causes failure. That one fails, the one next to it. So not only do we have cascading failures in the individual vehicle, we could have them with exposures. So now again, tactics, we got to think, how do we fight this fire? Poor access to get water under it. The best option is going to be to pull that car out where we can get to it. So do we have hooks? Do we have a winch? Do we have a vehicle that can pull it? How are we going to get that car out once it's on fire so it doesn't start burning the cars next to it? And again, if it's an electric car next to it, our problem's worse. But if it's not an electric car, it's still another car fire in a parking garage, maybe under a bunch of apartments or condos, where that's going to be a challenge for us. So we got to think, but quick action makes the difference typically. Those are our tactics, and we'll circle back to them. This one's, I think, good. Again, a great example because it shows that process. So kind of watch the timer. Whoops. I thought I had it started. There we go. Watch that timer, and we can see some of those signs coming out of it as it goes through. Some of that very dark smoke early on right there. You can see it maybe on the right-hand side now, on the left-hand side. I have this sound off just for the video, but that whistling, the venting of pressure, and now we'll see that smoke change a little bit in color, but it's on a charger, and we said on chargers are a big deal because that creates the energy input. Now that smoke has caught fire, and we've got those jet-like under the vehicle fire. That's a great indicator that it's an electric vehicle fire. The fire is low. That's where the battery packs are in these vehicles because of weight, because of balance. It's not in the passenger compartment yet. To fight this fire effectively, we need water under it on those battery packs. And notice that it is now catching the vehicle next to it on fire, and that's the way these fires go, right? They continue to spread. The good thing is it was on a charger pretty quick here. It burns through the charging cable, and it's not on a charger anymore. So it, you know, it's a little bit, but once it's burning, it's burning. That doesn't stop the incident at all. And again, imagine all that smoke, which is toxic, inside of a parking garage. This is outside, but you can see the volume of it in someone's garage. That becomes an issue. We've got to be in full PPE. We got to be watching for the exposures around it. And we got a little bit lucky there. It burned the brakes on the delivery truck and it just rolled back. But you can see that it's fully involved. So these events, because of those jet-like flames, it's not just burning up, it's burning out directionally, and that creates a lot of problems for us. And again, tons of videos on the internet if you want to watch these cars burn. A lot of them are pretty cool. And typically when we have the cascading failures in vehicles, that's what we get. Most of the time they catch fire, but some of the time, especially when they're confined in garages or in tight areas, the gases don't catch fire right away, but we fill up that space with explosive toxic gases, and we can get a vapor cloud explosion. And you can see that picture there from that car that was in the garage, had a failure that didn't ignite initially. They were able to fill the garage enough with vapors to find a source of ignition, which could have ultimately been the car, or it could have been something else like a water heater or something that ignited those vapors. And you can see the magnitude of that explosion that blew the roof out. So, you know, we worry about fire. We also need to be mindful of these cars failing, lots of gases, lots of heat that haven't burned yet, because we could be going into an environment charged with an explosive amount of smoke that hasn't yet ignited. So we've got to be careful on how we work. And again, being in front of the garage door or a side door is a horrible spot to be when these things explode. And again, these batteries, there's a kind of a rough rule of thumb. Fires about 90% of the time. The other, 10% are those vapor cloud explosions. And each kilowatt hour of battery capacity can yield about 700 liters of toxic flammable gases. And like an average Tesla's anywhere from 50 to 80 kilowatt hours. The Rivian's 135, an e-bike's about 1 kilowatt hour, but still in a small area, 700 liters of toxic flammable gases are coming off of these things. So be very careful about it. When we look for signs of failure, these are pouch batteries. We can see that swelling is very, very typical. And some of you may have had, cell phones that looked like that. They wouldn't set flat on the table anymore because the battery in the back of them had swollen. My daughter had one for years, and I finally made her give it up because I didn't want my house to burn down. But those are things that we want to look for. Visible swelling, changing in colors, increasing temperature. Thermal imager or a temp gun become very important tools to look for damage, look for potential failure. So when we see heat that's abnormal, we want to get after it with water rapidly so that we can try to break that chain. If we pull enough heat out quickly, we can stop that cascading failure. Can't stop the failure in the individual cell, the battery, but we can stop it hopefully from spreading. And then we just look at a couple of the tactics, and we'll go through these kind of quickly because they're similar. But this is what we teach our folks. If we've got a damaged small battery pack cell phone, iPad, make sure that hazmat's called. We feel that these calls are hazmat because of the toxic gases. We've got metering for those. We can see things like fluorine in the air that not everybody has a capability of. We can measure flammability with different meters. So we want, and runoff's an issue. Isolate the area 300 feet. We want to get people back. Full PPE. Try to get that out of the structure if we can, not using elevators, because if it fails when we're with it in an elevator, that's bad. And then be ready for the battery to fail or catch fire at any time. That's why folks have to be in full PPE. We recommend metal pails because they don't melt. Again, easy to get, but that's a tactic. If it's on fire, evacuate the area, get people out because of the risk of toxic gases, notify hazmat, try to get it out of the structure or submerge it in a sink, a bathtub, a trash can with water, and then protect exposures or put out any fires that we may have seen. And we talk about, like why do we not get into an elevator with them? This is a scooter, an e-bike, and you can see how quickly that happened, right? Notice they all look down, they hear something, there's that dark smoke. Luckily, the guy reached for the door open, but that's an untenable environment very quickly. So we want to be very cautious about that. When we look at the batteries, right, we really look at on fire or damage. If it's on fire, we want to protect whatever's around it, put those fires out. And then if we can get the battery pack, get the mobility device out of the structure. Once it's out of the structure, once it's out, we want to try to overpack that using something like cell block. And cell block, I'm sure everybody's heard that, is a proprietary material. It looks a lot like absorbent, like kitty litter. They're little round beads, but they have the ability to insulate, to not allow that electricity to move to other cells, to insulate thermally, to absorb any heat that comes off of a cell. And they're very porous. They have a very microporous surface. So if there is a failure of a battery in cell block, as long as we haven't overloaded that container, the gases given off can be absorbed into the surface of that cell block material. So it really is the thing that we need to use because it gives us that protection, thermal, electrical, and it will absorb some of the gases generated by failures of these batteries. All right, and there's an example of some of the prepackaged ones, the cell blocks in the bag. We can buy these ready to go. You basically prepay for the shipment to a recycler. They've got to ship as damaged, defective, or recalled batteries. Once they've been damaged, we can't just ship them as a regular lithium-ion battery. But it's all set up. We take the batteries, we put them in that metal pail mixed in with cell block. It's got all the labels, all the shipping prepaid, and then it just goes ground to a recycler. It's a very easy way to do it. It's not the most cost effective. We can buy cell block, we can buy pails, and we can do that ourselves. But, it's an easy way to manage small numbers of batteries. And if you're trying to build a program to just help out people in your community, the people we serve, that's an easy way to do it. And for the cost, we can, if you have the ability, back charge to homeowners insurance or renters insurance to get the money for the cost of those batteries going. But it doesn't leave them in the hand of the person whose house was on fire, who then says, I don't know what to do. I'm just throwing them in the trash. And then, a day later, we're going to the trash truck fire in the middle of downtown. We'll talk a little bit about EVs. And again, an electric vehicle can have a fire that's not related to the batteries. And that's that picture on the left, right? Somebody was smoking in the car. They put a stereo in and it shorted, and the upholstery's on fire, the seat's on fire, something like that. The simple option is put the fire out. Now, fires from the battery packs are typically low on the car, and we can see the heat in the bottom. Those are different. We still want to try to put the fire out, but we want to try to cool the batteries. So it's as much getting water under it as it is getting into the occupant's compartment, right? The passenger compartment. And then protect our exposures. So try to get it away from other cars or other things away from it. And then we said charging is a big deal. If it's charging, try to shut down the cabinet, because when we can stop putting power into it, that will reduce the risk a lot, and then fight the fire that's happened. This is our electric vehicle tactics. And again, these are just out of the PowerPoint. The ones in the battery response guide are a little bit more detailed, a little bit more in depth. But again, hazmat and rescue, whatever you have. One of the things we see with electric vehicles is that they have the tendency to fail locked. So we may have to extricate to get people out of that vehicle, whether it's on fire or just damaged in a collision. So we want to set ourselves up to do that. The locks in something like a Tesla or electric, there's manual backups, but a lot of owners, most owners, I would say, don't know where the manual pull is. And we're finding people stuck in their cars that can't get out. So we want to be able to get them out if we need to, especially if that car catches fire. We want to be able to get those out. So we need the right tools, the right resources to do it. If it's damaged, get people out. Don't let people back in. Make sure we leave doors open so we have access if they're open. And then again, start looking for signs of failure. Temp gun or thermal imager, listening for hissing or venting, looking for gases coming off of it. We want to be aware of those sorts of things. Make sure we pull a hand line in case it does fail, that we're ready to fight that fire. And if it's in a structure, making sure that we have a plan to get it out of there so that we don't have a structure fire as well, or additional vehicles on fire. If it's on fire, make sure that we still have those other resources coming. Make sure that everybody knows it's an electric vehicle. That changes our tactics. Secure it against movement, chalking the wheels to make sure it doesn't go. We'll talk about a device that immobilizes through the charger on electric vehicles that works very well. Look for hotspots, but very quickly think about a quick attack. We want to get water on it quickly to try to break that cascading failure if we can. Make sure that it's not occupied. So as we pull a hand line, the officer should be doing a quick check with the thermal imager for hotspots. Are they up high or down low? If they're down low, it's probably the battery. Looking for anybody inside of it that may be trapped, that can't get to the manual locks, so that we can try to get them out quickly before it becomes untenable in that vehicle. Try to put it out with a tank of water. If we can get it with a tank of water, if we break that cascading, then we're successful. If not, it's probably going to take a lot of water to do it. And then we've got to think about what's our best option. Is it worth putting 3,000, 4,000 gallons of water on this vehicle and creating other problems maybe, or just make sure that it's away from other things and let it burn? If we do need to put it out, submerging it, probably the best option, either digging a hole to get it into, or building a berm around it to flood up to the battery pack. That's our best way to do it. In Europe, they bring out a crane and put it in a dumpster. That's an option. I don't know that it's an easy option. And then think about pulling it out. Do we have vehicles with winches? If it's in a structure, just to protect the exposure, allow us to fight the exposure fire. Do we have tow chains? Just those big hooks that they use that we can hook onto an engine or a support vehicle, a command vehicle, and pull that vehicle out to the driveway or out to the street, so it's not going to expose other vehicles. And then if you had the money, it'd be cool to get one of those repo tow trucks just to drive around. But I don't know anybody that has one yet. If you do, let me know, because I think that would be awesome. Because it just looks fun, and to not be shot at when you're repoing stuff would be worth it. Other things to think about, we talked a little bit about the extrication challenges. Secure the vehicles against movement. The problem with electric vehicles, we all know, is we don't know if they're on or off because they don't make noise. So we got to make sure that that thing's de-energized so it doesn't move. Unfortunately, there have been a few cases, one in New York City with the firefighter that was injured at a extrication when the driver, pushed the accelerator either accidentally or when he got nervous, and that vehicle moved so much torque in those motors that, just wheel chocks may not be enough to stop it. So de-energizing it, we can always open it up and cut the firefighter links, the ones that are designed to de-energize it, but that takes a little bit of time. We'll show you a device that is works on the charger. If I can get to the charger, I just plug that thing in, because all the electrical vehicles are designed when they're charging not to move, so that people don't drive off with the chargers. And it's genius. If they would have done that with gasoline engines back in the day, think about how many calls we would have not gone to. The other thing is laminated safety glass. This isn't just an electric vehicle issue. It's becoming an every vehicle issue, as the standards for keeping occupants in the car in a rollover change at the federal level. That side curtain airbags, or what we're seeing more is laminated glass on side windows of vehicles. And again, laminated glass is much safer to not break away, but now we can't just punch it with a window punch or the tip of a Halligan or something. We've got laminated glass, and now we either need to cut it with a Sawzall, glass saw, chop it with an axe or something, but we need tools to be able to get through that. They make, snippers, automatic shears that work off of an impact wrench. We can get just that saw that works. There's lots of ways to do it, but we may not have that capability on every engine company. And if we have somebody in a vehicle that's trapped, that's on fire with laminated glass, and we're not thinking laminated glass, we may not be prepared for it. So again, that's a tactic change that we need to be ready for. And then we said, there are reference sheets out there. I didn't pull a picture for this, I apologize, through the USFA or the NFPA website that have individual vehicle, show us where the cut loops are, where the high voltage lines are. That's that device we said, and it comes out of Belgium, I believe, but it's designed to fit into any electric vehicle charger, and it will immobilize the vehicle once you put that in. And once you put it in, it trips that breaker until it's reset at the console. That vehicle can't move. So it's a pretty cool device, something you might want to think about, along with the ability to cut laminated glass to be able to deal with those challenges. And laminated glass, we said, isn't just an electric vehicle challenge, it's an everything challenge. I'll switch gear real quick. I know we're almost at the end. I want to give time for questions if there are any, but I just want to hit these other two things. Energy storage systems, they're everywhere. They're there because we want uninterruptible power in buildings, but we're also seeing them because of the cost drive. Power is more expensive during the day. So, I can offer you a building with a big energy storage system that will buy power at night when it's cheap, and I can sell it back, work off those banks of power to the people in my building at a lower rate. So it gets us price stability, it gets us demand stability, so that in brownouts and stuff, we're not losing productivity. So it's becoming more and more common. The other place we're seeing it is in these homemade power walls. And if you look at that picture on the right, those are all those individual cells And one of the things that's super common is buying a battery pack out of a damaged Tesla. And you go on eBay and look for them. They're there. And then I take that battery pack, bring it to my house, and then set it up on end and make it a power wall, an energy storage system in my house, relatively cheap. The problem is I don't know what happened to that Tesla when it was damaged, when it was wrecked. Is this a battery pack out of one of the ones from Florida that was flooded? So be cautious about those.
You're fine.
And the other thing, the energy storage systems, we really need to pre-plan those. Know that they're in your community. Work with your fire prevention permitting to make sure we've got good standoff distances, good access, that they've got venting for the interior if they do have a release. But mostly there's nobody living in them. So it doesn't make sense to expose our people into these things if there's not a life safety hazard. And the life safety hazard's probably us. So at least 300 feet, be careful of doors or panels. Those are the weak points. Mostly they have gas venting, explosion-proof panels. They may be on the top or they may be on the side. So again, there's no reason for us to be there, but know who owns them, have contact information, and work with the utility or the building owner that owns them. They generally have battery management systems. They can see what's happening in them to know whether or not what condition they're in. They generally have suppressing systems, but they're not suppressing systems that we think about. They're not there to fight fire. They're there early on in a thermal event to try to cool that thermal event before it becomes a cascading failure. Once that system's dumped, nothing else is stopping it. So ultimately, what we may do is just have to supply lots of water to the pre-plumbed extinguishing systems and just try to draw that heat out through water, through the sprinkler system. But again, pre-plan them, work with the building department or permitting before they get there, and then don't go inside of them because there's really no life safety risk until we get in them or near them if they fail. And they very well may be charged with lots of hot gases. Chief Del Rey said we're going to be in Baltimore at the iChiefs Thursday, June 8th, 8 in the morning till noon. We'll also be at the Continuing Challenge in Sacramento in September. Would love to come to your community, wherever it is. I'm sure it's beautiful. I would love to come and drink beer there if you offer me a chance. We also have a battery technician class where we'll take battery packs and cut them up, look at how best to do it, overpack them, see sort of how they're laid out, get a little deeper into the individual batteries, but to make sure that we're able to effectively get those things out. It's hard to overpack a whole e-bike, so we may have to cut that thing up. What's it take to do that safely and not damage more batteries or create other problems for us? Thank you guys very much. I'm gonna exit out of the, if I can, I'm gonna exit out of my my screen here and then get back. And if there are questions, which are hopefully things like, why were you so good at doing this? I appreciate those questions.
Yeah, we'll certainly leave some time for questions, but I just want to say, Brett, outstanding job. I love the fact that you took this really emerging threat, which is fully emerged already. I was in Manhattan earlier in the week, and all the bike lanes are fully occupied with e-bikes, and the fires they're causing are tremendous. But you've taken an emerging threat and turned it into practical, realistic tactics that we should all be thinking about and doing, and then even more so, put it into a battery response guide, right? Because there's so much that we're tasked with knowing and having available to us based on the type of emergency response we're doing. To have a response guide with you is an amazing tool to have with you. So great job, brother.
Well, thank you, Chief. Yeah, and I'll hold it up. That's the guide we created. So to go with you, and again, it really was. I'm not smart, and that's why I thought a guide would be handy because I forget stuff rapidly, and to have a tool with us in the field a week later, a month later, a year later that talks about the tactics, I think makes things better. It makes things easier because this is new. It's emerging. It's not something we practice with in drill school because it wasn't around when probably lots of us went through drill school. So it is changing, and we got to be ready for it. So that was the intent. The other thing which we didn't really touch on, but we will in the class, like I said, is that flow chart for building a program. All the stuff to think about if you're going to build a program for your community. Do we use prepaid drums to ship them back, or do we do it ourselves, or do we just let the homeowner manage it? So we'll talk about that in that 4-hour class. If you come see us in Baltimore, that'll be part of that as well. Hopefully anybody that's back there, we'd love to chat with you about it.
Yeah,
Hey, Brett,
that's help also.
we do have a question in the chat box. Do you need to vent the overpack with a damaged battery so it won't build pressure?
Yeah, and generally we're holding on to our batteries, which again is kind of in that checklist. I apologize for not covering it here. We set on them for 3 weeks if they're just going out, just to allow them time if they are going to react. So we have a storage area outside undercover where we'll leave the drums open or at least vented to do it. Now, in reality, the cell block, like we said, has the ability to absorb gases, and as long
Hey, Brett, you accidentally muted yourself there. There you go.
I don't know where I got muted, but yes, we will leave them. We sit on them for about 3 weeks, just to make sure as long as the containers aren't overfilled with batteries, the cell block has the ability to absorb those gases. But just being conservative, we'll hold on to them in a covered area until, and then also that lets us have a place if our fire prevention folks, the fire investigators, because they may have been a cause of a fire, they're still around if they need to look at them to make sure that we have that ability for them to still be there. But yeah, we do vent them until to give them time to make sure that they are hopefully fully discharged. But the cell block works well as well. And if you haven't seen it, I'll try to hold it up. That's that cell block material, and it looks a lot like absorbent, but it's more ceramic.
Thanks, Brett. A couple more questions. And guys, if you have to hop, I know we're a little bit over the time, but Brett told me he's got time to answer questions. So I love the interaction. So keep the questions coming if you guys have them. Brett, what is your opinion on undercarriage nozzles, such as the Suds, or Best Nozzle?
Yeah, I mean, and I think that they're all options. And it's a little bit funny because when I started 25 years ago, we all had cellar nozzles and stuff, and then we got rid of them, and that's probably the answer. We played around with them. I honestly think that probably submerging a vehicle is the best way to do it, and we're working with a company to try to come up with like a quick. They make berms for flood prevention. They're they absorb water, self-inflating, I guess is the word. They absorb water and grow. And we're trying to work with them to see if we can get easy to deploy berm that we could just stretch around the car. And then as we put water onto the battery packs, you just have to get to basically to the floorboard, and you've got it. So you don't need a lot of depth, but they certainly work. It gets water under the vehicle, which is what we have to do. There's no other way to do it. But I feel like they're kind of expensive. Some of them are sort of cumbersome. But I don't, the water's got to get to the batteries, and the batteries are down low. So it's a tool that gets us there. I'd like to see us get to the point where we can quickly, circle the car and then submerge it. because I think that's the easiest way. A lot of water and direct contact with the battery pack, the whole battery pack, will make us more efficient. And then the runoff's contained as well. So that's another win in doing that. So that's my preference. I think we're going to have something pretty quick. I think the company's super excited to try to fill that void, and it should be relatively inexpensive based on what they make for the flood control market.
Awesome. All right, Brett, we've got one more here. Does the battery in an EV car pose an electrocution hazard if you try to cut them from the vehicle?
Yes. Yeah. If they have energy, the cars, and I don't know that we mentioned it, but we're looking at, in some cases, the wires we're not supposed to cut, the orange wires, and some of the cars out there are up to 600 volt. So yeah, we want to be very careful in doing that. That's probably not our preferred method. And that's also why we got to be real careful about some of the tools that people are selling to get to the battery pack that, have a nozzle that penetrates, like the words are escaping me right now, but we want to be careful jabbing metal into those batteries, because there are very high voltage pieces of it that run the traction motors, hundreds of volts, 600 volts. Some of the big buses and over the road trucks might be in the 900 volt range. So it's certainly not something that we want to mess around with. Individual batteries, no, but the cumulative batteries, yeah. And we want to be super careful about getting in there and trying to pick them apart.
All right, sorry, one more here. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on rolling the car on its side to allow access?
Yeah, and a lot of people, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 gallons of water. We've seen people try to jack them up with high lift jacks. The disadvantage in doing that is you're right there where the fire's jetting out. We saw those jet fires, and it's hard. I've seen people try tow trucks. The problem again is that fire sometimes damages the cables and the lift mechanisms. But if you can get it on its side, absolutely, because that gets us direct exposure to it. So that does what we want to do to be able to fight that fire. I don't know that it's always going to be an easy option, but if you're somewhere where you can do it relatively quickly, I think it's good. That's probably the easiest way to get access to the part of the car we need. Now, as we're seeing more things like the Rivians and the Ford Lightnings that are higher, they're going to be harder to do flooding, submerging, but it's much easier to get water underneath of them because they have higher ground clearance. So we're going to build to sort of two models. But yeah, and what do you have to flip the car easily? Do you drive around with a forklift or something? That'd be cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Brett. We're getting some great feedback already. And again, this is just a taste of your class that you've developed. I'm so excited for you to launch it at this year's iChiefs conference. I think it'll be a great course.
Yeah, I can't welcome Mick Kara and Chief Del Rey. Come to the class. We'll try to have extra field guides, the battery response guides, and we'll try to get them to you. Come check out the class. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you think about this. If it was good or bad or things that would make it better for you. And then again, we're call Kara and book a class if you want to. We'd love to come to your community and do this for you and your community. Thanks for giving up some time of your day. I appreciate that. And thank you again.
Thanks, Brett. Thank you so much. And for everyone still on the call, we'll be delivering 4 of our courses this year at iChiefs. We'll have a really strong presence. So I'll be there, Nick will be there, Brett will be there, and we hope to see everyone stop by our booth or come to one of our or many of our training classes.
Yeah, I'll just hit it while we still have everybody on the call. Wednesday, June 7th, we're doing Above and Below the Line. Chris Aguirre and Brett Bigger together, delivering version 23, believe it or not, of Above and Below the Line. Thursday morning, Brett delivering Battery IQ. Thursday in the afternoon, Chris Aguirre and Brett together delivering Biotech IQ. And then on Saturday, June 10th, we're delivering Drug IQ. So really important programs that really boil down to tactics to be safe. Thank you.